Good morning, everybody. We are in week 4
Yep.
of our Bible reading plan. So that is all the way up to day 28th. I'm sorry, January 28th. Well, that makes sense because the first month and days go in.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that would be what? Exodus 12. Is that right? Yep,
Yep.
Exodus 12
through 35.
part of 35.
Part of 35, yeah.
The 35, 29. 35-ish. The 35 area.
Yes.
Okay, and all right, so before we jump into that, we've got a couple questions from last week, and that's kind of to be expected because by the time, so let's see, by the time Sunday rolls around for people to be able to ask questions, we've kind of already covered the week ahead. So every once in a while, as someone's reading, we'll get questions in retrospect, and that's perfectly fine. If something pops in your mind, even if it's from a few weeks ago, it's like, hey, I remember reading that, what do you think?
That's
Fair
fair.
game. We love it. We want everybody, we want to be in the Bible together. And the really cool thing about that is even when we're not at church, if I'm at the cafe and someone else comes in from the cafe and we all know we just read the same thing together, we're able to say, hey, what did you think of? It's kind of like when you all watch a football game together. Man, did you see that pass?
Yeah.
And so, hey, what did you think about Moses doing that? I never even knew. And so that's been a really fun thing for us all to just be in it together. So, and why do I say that? I say that if this is your first week catching up with us, jump in where we're at so that you can be, again, we're all in it together. Don't think, oh, I need to start at day 1 and catch up. You know what? Next year, Genesis will still be there. It's cool. God created the world. You're caught up. So jump in today and be with us on this journey. That's the fun of it, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So, having said that,
Yep.
we've got a couple questions from last week's reading that was brought to us.
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right. So the first question is, let's see. Oh, wait. I lost
Oh,
them.
before we do that,
Second.
Becca,
Yes.
tell everyone where we're at today.
Oh, we're in the parsonage. We got moved in yesterday.
Yeah, the movers came yesterday. We are now in the parsonage. Before we were commuting quite a bit. And so now we're in the parsonage. The movers have come. We are here.
Yes.
If you're in the local area, once we get it all tied up, we're going to have kind of an open house thing. That'll be fun. But yeah, we're here. So if it looks different, that's why.
Okay, so our first question is about the plagues. Did the Hebrew people also suffer from the plagues?
Okay.
Yes.
This would be the plagues of Egypt.
Of Egypt.
As part of the coming out. Okay.
Because of Pharaoh not letting the people go.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
So I have a couple of questions that kind of piggyback that, but I would say there are some plagues that definitely they would be affected by. Like if all the water was turned to blood, and that's what this person that asked this too had the same thought. If all the water was turned to blood, how would the Hebrews, like all would be all. So it would affect the Hebrews.
All right. So what's the question?
So the question is, did the Hebrew people also suffer from the plagues?
Oh, okay. Okay. So if we jump into, so where do the plagues start? Kind of 7-ish.
Too far back.
I would say we know that not all of them because, well, did you have a thought on this or do you want me to jump in?
I guess I can see how God could protect the Hebrew people, like protect their homes from the flies and the frogs and things getting into their homes, so they wouldn't be affected there. But if they were out in public, how would they not be affected by that?
Okay, I see. So the idea is being, so let's make it racial, right? So if all of the, boy, can you, let's not even go there. Let's make it everyone with a red shirt, right? Yeah. And if they're all hanging out, somehow the people with red shirts aren't hitting the marketplace. Well, that's not what's going on here. It's not racially profiling. What's actually happening is we read about this in Genesis. Joseph is in charge. He looks at his dad and says, hey, you guys go live in, do you remember this? Goshen.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yes.
Because the things that you want to sacrifice, the things that you want to raise up, the cattle, the sheep, that's an abomination to the Egyptians.
Right.
Their acts are an abomination to you. And so it's not just that these guys were kind of intermingled. the Jews were actually living in a geographically different place within Egypt
Oh, okay.
called Goshen.
Okay, right.
All right. And so when the plagues came, it wasn't like Jews were hanging out in the marketplace
Of the Hebrews.
of the Egyptians.
Right, of the Egyptians, right.
Now the Jews were slaves.
Right.
And so it does seem to reason that there would have been some co-mingling and coexisting. And so I would say that where God sent, let's say, hell, everyone that was in that area got held upon. When he sent flies, anyone hanging out in that area would have gotten flies.
That makes sense, yeah.
So before we ask if it was, did it affect them, I would say our first question is not by person, it's by region. So we don't separate it by Jews and Egyptians. We separate it by Goshen and Egypt.
Okay.
Tracking?
Tracking.
All right.
Yeah.
So now the question really becomes, did all the plagues also hit Goshen?
Right.
All right. And we know at least some of them didn't. In Exodus chapter 8, God sends flies. Let's see. Pharaoh's trying to get him out of there. And then... Let's see. And the house of the Egyptians shall be filled with swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. But on that day, so I'm in verse 22. But on that day, I will set apart the land of Goshen. And remember, Goshen is where Joseph sent Jacob and his brothers of Israel. On that day, I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarms of flies shall be there. So I would say any Hebrews that were in Egypt outside of Goshen had flies. Likewise, I think any Egyptians that were in Goshen
Were protected.
didn't have flies.
Yeah.
And so we see him protecting them that way.
Yeah.
Now, I think so there. We know that at least some of the plagues were separated between Goshen and...
Locality.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense.
But we also know of one specifically that hit the entire land. And that's why the Jews separate Passover. Because even the Jews had to put the blood of the lamb on the wood. Yep. The angel of death passed over, and whether it was Egypt or whether it was specifically Goshen, any house that didn't have the blood of the lamb on the wood, firstborn was going to die.
Right, yep.
So we know that was also Goshen.
That was for all of them.
Yep. Okay.
All right. And then the last question that was sent was, if all the water throughout Egypt turned into blood, then... Oh, wait.
Okay.
Let me continue here. Sorry. Also, the people went for 7 days without water. Generally, we can only go without water for 3 days. Okay. I'd like to hear your view on this.
Where are we thinking that they went 7 days without water? What?
That they didn't reference. But
I know what this is. Okay. This is... So there are times in the Bible where people fast from food and water, and that's kind of a miraculous thing. Most of the time we just see fasting from food.
Food, yeah.
For instance, when we do prolonged fast, it's food. We've never done like a 10-day fast from water. If the Lord hasn't called you to that, specifically, visibly and viably,
don't do it.
Don't go days without water. I think where they're getting from that is there's a verse. Man, this is... Can we switch Bibles?
I think they might be the same. Well, mine's a New American Standard. What's
no, yours says a bigger print, and I don't have my glasses. But thanks.
Alright, and I
All right.
my glasses for this one.
So somewhere, and I think it's in chapter 7, it talks about the water being blood for 7 days. They turn it to blood. The magicians turn it to blood. So all the Egyptian... verse 25. Here we go. Verse 7:25. And 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. Then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh. So there's that.
That's yes.
7 full days had passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. Okay, so a few things are going on here. one, most simplistically, we don't know the water was blood for 7 days. We just know it was 7 days between when he struck the Nile and when the next movement in the plot happens.
Okay.
When God's now doing the next thing with Moses.
Okay.
We, honestly, that water could have been blood for 40 days. We don't know that he turned it back right then.
Right.
Or it could have been blood and then not blood. Could have been shorter, could have been longer. But here's what we do know. and this kind of comes on the question of, did the water in Goshen also turn to blood? How did the Goshenites, how did the Hebrews drink? And then more importantly, maybe not more importantly, where did the Pharaoh's magicians get the water to turn into blood if the water had all been turned to blood?
Right.
Okay? All right.
You catch all those little things such as that. Like, I didn't catch that.
Well, yeah, and so let's say that the water had been turned to blood for 40 days. How did they drink? Could they really go that long without water? But Moses is so good to us. So verse 25, 7 full days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. But if we go back one verse, you want to read that?
Where are we at?
So 25 is 7 full days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. But if we back up one verse,
What I'm asking is, at 8:25? Is that where you're at?
7:25.
7:25. Thank you. Okay, so it's over here. Okay. So 7:24 says, "So all the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the Nile."
okay. So the water in the Nile had been turned to blood, but they're drinking where?
They dug around the Nile, so they're not digging in the Nile.
So they're digging wells, and they're able to drink the well water.
Okay.
So why? What is that? The Hebrews would have read this in a context that we miss.
Okay.
When he says, man, he turned all the water to blood, they would have caught something. We're thinking all the H2O in the land got turned to blood.
Right.
What they heard is the Nile River, which they worshipped as Egyptians for their source of life, and that's what water is,
Right.
got turned to blood. The Nile River, which they worshipped as their source of life, all of the fish in it died and it began to stink.
Right. Yes.
Then, out of that, all these frogs come out. They don't want to hang out in that river of blood.
Yeah.
Now, the frog god that they worshipped is all around them. They can't kill the frogs because they worship it as deity. They want to get rid of it.
Right.
Now, the frogs die. What happens when you have a bunch of dead things? Flies. The flies come in, and the fact that the flies were all in Egypt but not Goshen makes me think that the frogs came to Egypt, not Goshen, especially if they would have been in the area of the river.
Right.
You got all the dead frogs, the flies come in. The flies, as you know, when you've got a fly manifestation, then the boils happen.
Right.
And again, the fly god that they worship is coming in, and I won't teach the whole thing right now, but each of the things that they worship these gods for brought the opposite of the very thing they were worshiping the gods to.
Yeah.
So in context, when these Hebrews and these Egyptians read about this water being turned to blood, they know we're not losing our H2O. God, the warrior, is fighting and defeating the gods of the area to rescue us out of their territory.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and
I'm often asked about this. So the question is, does this speak about Jesus? And the short answer would be yes, because he says the entire Bible, John 5:39,
speaks
entire Bible's about
to
it.
find life. Yeah.
First plague, the first miracle we see Moses really do is the water to blood. That's the first plague.
That's first plague. Yeah.
The first miracle that Jesus does is water to wine. And if we stop there, we miss what's actually happening. That water to wine, the water is the ceremonial washing pots. This is how they thought they got clean. The Egyptians thought this is how they got life. The Jews thought this is how they get clean. He turns that water to wine, then sits down at a Passover, holds up the wine and says, "This is how you think you got clean." He says, "But this is my blood of the New Testament." So Jesus turning the water to wine to blood, and I think that this water to blood is a picture of Jesus' water to blood.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, what's next?
That was the end of the questions that we received.
Okay, I got a couple questions that. Okay, Exodus 22. Exodus 22. We read a bunch throughout the book of Exodus about restitution. It's a book of laws, and the idea being, if you break this law, here's the punishment. If you break this law, here's the punishment. If you steal if you steal a sheep, you got to pay 5 back. If you steal this or that, right?
Right.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And so the question is, why is a God of grace so wrapped up in punishments and restitution and law if he's such a God of forgiveness and grace?
I would say part of that would be because there's consequences. Like there's consequences when we're not obedient or when we're sinful or act harshly against someone else.
Right, but those
And
consequences came from God, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So
I
why
think-
did God have to make consequences?
Well, I think because he's a loving God,
Yeah.
and when we act those different ways, like we're not acting in the character of God. We were created in His image, and so anything that's outside of His image, anything we're doing outside of His image, there's going to be consequences.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. So it's kind of like that parental figure saying, if you get out of line, I will whoop you.
well, in one form or another, yes.
Okay. What if we looked at it like this? When we talk about forgiveness, Jesus taught us to pray, Lord, forgive us our debts as we forgive those who owe us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Forgive us our transgressions as we forgive those we've transgressed against. And debt, in a really real way, is saying, and there's so much going around. We were talking about that book last night. There's so much going around on the idea of forgiveness of, well, the reason you forgive, and basically they equate forgiveness to a feeling.
Right.
And the reason you forgive is so that you can be set free. I forgive so I can be set free. It's so that I can, it's all for me.
Right. But that's not what forgiveness is.
And there's even this blasphemy going around that you can forgive God, right? You got to let it go for your sake.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at biblical forgiveness, forgiveness is, this person owes me. They owe me restitution. They owe me the right to be vindicated by punishing them. And so by forgiving them, I have to forgive them of something.
Right.
Which not only means the action, I'm forgiving them of the action, but it also means I'm forgiving them of a consequence.
Right.
And so the book of Exodus, I think, is this beautiful way of saying, someone kills one of your sheep, they owe you 4. And now forgiveness is going, you know what, Fred? You've come to me. You've explained the situation. I forgive you. Keep your 4 sheep. Because now I know what I'm forgiving them, and now they know what I'm forgiving them of. And that's the beauty of, you know what you're being forgiven from and forgiven of.
Right.
And I think the beauty of the wages of sin is death, and Jesus going through such pains to tell us what that looks like, is because now we can understand what we're forgiven of.
Yes. Makes sense.
This is the debt we don't have to pay, because he said, you know what? I've paid it. And the other thing about restitution, if a guy comes to you, you steal a sheep, you owe him 5, you don't have 5 sheep. There's no way you can pay that.
Can't pay it back, yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of this, is when Jesus says, look, you guys, there is no amount of restitution that you can make for this. I forgive you. Any other questions on that? Want to skip to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. 10 Commandments. Where are the 10 Commandments?
It's Exodus.
Somewhere in
20?
Exodus. Oh, 20. Okay. So there was a question about, it seems like there's more than 10 commandments, but the Bible specifically tells us there are 10 commandments. And so how do we know which 10? I would say regardless, okay, here's what I mean by it seeming like there's more than 10 commandments. Let's count them all out. One, you shall have no other gods before me. That's one. Yep. You shall not make for yourself carved image, any likeness, anything that's in the earth. That's a commandment. Mm-hmm. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For the Lord your God is jealous God. That would be 3.
You shall not take the name of the Lord.
Not take the Lord of your name God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. And I gotta be honest with you, I barely watch TV anymore. Yep. It seems like every single show, they can be rated PG because they don't have the F word, but they can take the Lord's name in vain.
Yep. It's very sad.
And number 5, so 6, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You've got honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. That's 10, right?
I think you double counted the Sabbath, or the one before that.
The Sabbath was 6. And then honor your father and mother, 7. Murder, 8. Adultery is 9. You shall not steal is 10. Am I off? 6,
you are.
7, 8. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That would be 10. Then look, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. 11. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. 12. Or his servant, female servant, ox, donkey. Okay, so it looks like there are 12 imperatives there. Mm-hmm. And they want to know which are the 10 commandments.
Right.
Okay. Here's here is the not really very important thing of how we divide this. This is the least important part of what we're going to talk about today. So immediately when we talk about you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, don't covet, right? Honor your father and mother. Then we can come up here, we can say, you shall have no other gods before me. Here's what I think. You shall have no other gods before me. And then this next verse is kind of an expansion. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness or anything that's heavens. I think that goes with...
That's all one.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Here's the only time this matters, when you're trying to make a plaque or when you're making a movie, all right? Or if you think, God's lying here because there have to be 10. I can tell you that's not the case. We can easily divide this up into 10. The argument comes to, how do we divide this up into 10? Mm-hmm. Okay, again, we can walk through the different divisions. Here's the most important, the least important part is how they divide up.
Yes.
Here's the takeaway. You do all 12 of those, you're good, right? You do all 12 of those, you've kept the command. And the really important thing is most of the time, this argument over how we divide them up is a sense of pride over, and I think it's kind of a cloud cover. Because anyone having that argument, if I asked you, Becca, have you ever told a lie?
Yes.
Okay, boom. James says if you've broken one, you've broken all 10. Even if it's one of the 12, you've broken all 10.
Yep.
And so the real thing to take away of it, if you do all 12 of those imperatives, that's the 10 commandments. None of us have done it. Every one of us have gotten extra change back at one point and not given it back. Or we've taken a pen or a paper clip home from the office. Or we've told a lie. Yep. None of us have done it. Nope. Therefore, the real takeaway from this isn't how we divide this up into 12. It's that we needed a Savior to come and rescue from the fact that we couldn't do any of them.
Right. Yep.
Cool. I think the last thing I will talk about, and the reason, so that's kind of the questions. If you have questions for us, send them in. This Sunday, I'm preaching on the Sabbath.
Yes.
Depending on you when you watch this. But on the day that we're making it, I can say this Sunday, we're preaching on the Sabbath. And one of the things that we read in Exodus is that the Sabbath is a sign between Israel and the God he brought them out of.
Yes.
And think about this. They were slaves in a land for 400 years.
Wow.
And then he says, here are all the things I want you to do. One of those things, I want you to not work for a day. He's telling, imagine being 80. You've been a slave for 80 years. You have worked and been overworked 365 days a year for 80 years. And now he's saying, one day a week,
Rest.
1 year out of 7, take a break.
Wow.
And
That'd be so welcomed.
wouldn't it?
Yes.
Wouldn't it? But they didn't do it. And in fact, he gets to one point, he says, listen, I want you to take a break. And it's like, great, no problem. Because one day I'm going to have servants. And also I'm one of those guys. No, you're male servant. Fine, my female. No, you're female servant too. Fine, I'll have the sojourner. No, listen. And he goes on when he tells this command. He says, you don't work. Your servants don't work. Pilgrims don't work. No, look, you're not getting around this. No one working. And he goes, look, I'm telling you, if you don't obey this, I'm going to kill you. And so he makes it a really big deal. Hey, you've been a slave. You know what it is to not have a rest. That's not my design. Take a break. So
I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, Sunday we're going to be talking about the Sabbath and how awesome and liberating that is.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right.
Jump in with us. Read the Bible. Send us your questions. We're looking forward to them.
Yep.
Anything you want to say to the group before we go?
Nope. Hope you have a good couple of days till we see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.